the essay that Usha was talking about, that I will present tomorrow. This is an anthology from Black Lawrence Press that just came out, and I've made copies of this, and I just didn't collate. So I will collate at some point today, and I'd like you to read the essay beforehand. That would be good. As far as my poetry is concerned, this was my first book, My Tranquil War, and that came out a few years ago. And this was very hard work. I did it during the Bush years, the whole last decade, so 10, 15 years of work, This was very difficult to do. The first book is always really hard. And this was very political and public, and a lot of response to artists and, ekphrastic and all that stuff. It's a very public kind of poetry. And I completely quit doing that. Like about 5 years ago, I was done with this. And I could have just gone on and on doing this kind of poetry. But I said, I'm not going to do this. I don't want to write any political poetry. So I quit that. And then I wasn't sure what I was doing 5 years ago. But I realized, now I can see 5 years later, what was happening is, there was this one book, so I've developed, I didn't realize how much poetry. I thought I was just writing fiction and other stuff. But actually I was writing a lot of poetry. So this one book that came out of it is called Whatever Speaks on Behalf of Hashish. And that's the next book that's coming out in the next, a few months. Then so this is very dreamy, surreal, like personal stuff. As confessional, I'm not a confessional poet, but as confessional as I can get in poetry, which is not a lot, but for me it's a lot. So because I look back at some of this stuff and I go, oh, this is very personal. This is stuff that was happening in my life. This is even dreamier and lyrical, and this is called The Moon Blooms in Occupied Hours. Hopefully this will come out also by the end of the year. So I'm just trying to accelerate and quickly publish these books that have sort of piled up. Soraya is the one that you heard at Book Woman, right? Yeah.
Book of Sonnets.
Yeah. This experimental 100 sonnets, and I wrote this in the spring of 2013. Just like in 3 weeks, 100 sonnets, I was done. And I could never do this again. It was just, this is a total departure from these two. So these were transitional, after My Tranquil. Then I was like, what comes next? And somehow this came out, and this totally changed my writing, my poetry, everything. This book was really, really important. And I can see now how important that was, because it took me out of this, this interest in politics and public life in just a completely different personal realm. And I'm happy being there, So I did that, and then I wrote another book just this spring. I'm not going to read from that because she said, don't read from that. But actually, while we were having this conversation, I just got a note from Laura Mullen, who's at LSU and an experimental poet, and she loved it. She's like, she just sent this note, actually. I forwarded it to her. She's like, this book saved did she say my life or my summer? Whatever, something like that. Because I thought she'd be happy reading this. This is a really crazy book. This is called Death is a Festival. So the whole book is about my obsession with death, and there's about 70 sonnets. Soraya-like sonnets, but much crazier. I think not as accessible, more obscure. Just having fun with language. And then this is the prose poetry hybrid. So there's a lot of world mythology. I go into all the ancient mythologies and folk tales and fairy tales and American funeral rites and cemeteries and like everything you do with death. Because when I started writing this book, I thought, well, the sonnets are going to be about death, but actually sonnets, I could not force them until the end to be about death. They kept turning out to be about life and just becoming exuberant. So I was like, the only way I can get death in there in sort of a melancholy way is through the prose, which worked, I think. So prose poetry, So that's the latest one, and I don't know what comes after that, but I think yes, did you want to say something, or? No? Oh, okay. So what should I read? I don't know. Maybe I'll read just a little bit from Moon Blooms, just maybe a couple of short things.
And then we can do another round.
Yeah.
Pick up another book.
Okay.
We can go to your books.
Okay. We'll have to do 4 or 5 rounds, yeah. But anyway, yeah, I'm looking at this stuff and like, hey, I wrote a lot of poetry. I just put these together this summer, and I wasn't sure what I had in my hand. So I was happy, like, okay, I was doing nothing else in my life, but I was writing poetry. So that's not bad. So this is called Soap. And if you've read or heard me read My Tranquil War and this sort, you'll know what a huge difference this is. It's just a totally different kind of poetry. Soap. Hawaiian, vulvular escort, whispering marmalade skin, dear vulgate of rosaries, exuding porous pores, Rothko's chapel friendly to my painted over eyes, laughter spreading over the villages of the East. Okay, here's one called The New Yorker. So I just became interested in short, brief, imagistic stuff. The shorter the better, I'm happy with short these days. The New Yorker. Summer stripped of cholerics, buses in suede, turquoise Central Park fog coats and no rain. Who knows poets drinking jazz down gullets of paper, drawing weather as a fire engine. Let me read this one called The Great Wall of China. In the 6th month, all is bustle and excitement. Write things down, animal-hearted, our life is war. Why grow arms back to front? Why the dizzying heights of the greater ranges? Jade, wine, pearls, monkeys, peacocks, coral, amber, lions, eggs as big as water jars, water and pasture but no city walls. The barbarian Huri with the flower-like face, nomadic chutzpah against the lake, tower for receiving distant nations, shelf of grass, shelf of glass. Its age, its speed of construction, its uniformity. I am a lonely, widowed ruler. I see sprawling crocodiles of humanity waiting for a capital to grow up around us. Wear silk and walk like scholars, not like those who live with birds and beasts. Pedigree of foreign exotica, matrilineal aphrodisiacs, laughs with the breath of spring, dancing in a dress of gauze. The height is 30 cubits, the width is 12, and it circles the entire empire in the last days of belligerent horsemen. The sorghum is ripe, and the soybeans are fragrant, 10,000 li long, the hearts of our compatriots arisen from the ripe plains. Singing melancholy songs with the people of my household, desires deep as gorges in border towns, the sure footfalls of the chamois sunset. Inside there is a letter on white cloth, I kneel. I'll stop there.